their Eighth Amendment rights to fairness. Would it surprise you if you heard that somebody wanted to abolish that whole secured release approach and go strictly to the unsecured release approach? Would that surprise you? It's kind of surprising, seems, but that's what's happening. I told you these pretrial service agencies, they have an organization, it's been in existence for maybe 30 years, called the National Association of Pretrial Service Agencies. And there are about 300 of those agencies in large counties around the country, and one of their operating policies says that all compensated surety bail, that is like private sector bail bonding, should be abolished. Well, they've been arguing that for about 30 years. They never did really get anywhere with it. And it might have had to do with the fact that they didn't have a lot of resources to go preach that message with. But here 3 or 4 years ago, there appeared on the scene a new organization called the Pretrial Justice Institute. And it has a lot of funding, and it gets, and a lot of that thanks is due to you and me, because it gets a good bit of its funding from the United States Department of Justice in the current administration. And what the Pretrial Justice Institute does is it goes around the country and it lobbies state legislators, local opinion leaders, local government officials, and judges to let's get rid of secured release. And let's go strictly with unsecured release as administered by these pretrial service agencies. A study was done about 3 years ago in Houston, Texas, comparing the felons released through the pretrial service agency and an equal number of felons who were released with surety bonds, and those with surety bonds were twice as apt to make their court appearances as those who were monitored by the pretrial service agency but without a surety bond. But that's what they want to do. Now, why do they want to do that? Why do they want to get rid of secured release? Well, they say because it's unfair. They say that it's just not fair to have somebody have to arrange to get out of pretrial custody. And then when you begin to analyze that theory, you're driven to ask yourself the question, what would have to be true for it to be unfair for somebody to have to meet the qualifications of Stack v. Boyle and secure their release? What would have to be true for that to be the case? Well, I think eventually you're driven to the conclusion that the thing that would make it unfair would be that it wasn't that person's fault that they got arrested in the first place. Now, if it's not their fault that they got arrested, how can it be fair to make them arrange for their release? If they're not responsible for being in jail, looks like the party that's responsible for them being in jail should have to pay for them to get out of jail. But if they're not responsible for being in jail, who's responsible for them being in jail? You are. I am. Society is. If we had been everything we should have been to that man all of his life, if we'd given him all of the succor and the support and the nurturing that he needed all of his life, he never would have done what he did. Never would have been arrested. But of course, that approach disregards, does it not, that language in Stack v. Boyle? Doesn't it disregard what Chief Justice Vincent said? You got to get the defendant to court. Governor Haley Barbour of Mississippi was talking with some of us here 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but he was telling us about a conversation that he had with a good friend of his named Fred Smith. Fred Smith is the founder of FedEx, and Governor Barbour said, Fred, how in the world has somebody found a business that lasts for years and years and years and grows to be a virtual, international, commercial empire? And he said, Mr. Smith told him, Haley, you got to do 2 things. Number one, you got to find out what's the main thing. And then number two, you got to always keep the main thing the main thing. Pretty simple, maybe pretty profound. Justice Vinson in the Supreme Court in 1951 said, listen, everybody, the main thing is getting the defendant to court. We lose it all if we lose that. Now, what these folks who want to do away with secured release want to do is they want to change the main thing. They want to make the main thing helping the defendant. They want to take care of the defendant. Justice Vinson wanted to take care of the rest of us too. Now, is there anything wrong with wanting to take care of the defendant? Absolutely not. And I'll say this and I'll close. Some of these people who get arrested really need help. Some of them are special needs cases. And I find absolutely no fault whatsoever with there being a county taxpayer-funded facility that goes into the jail and finds out who those people are and then tries to provide assistance to them. I have no problem with that. A humane society, if it's got the financial wherewithal, it ought to do that. I believe in that. Maybe the court wants to take somebody who is deep into some drug addiction, whether it's cooking crank, mainlining heroin, whatever it is, or maybe chronic alcoholism. And maybe the court wants to say, listen, I want your release secured, but I also want you to do this. I want you to go to 90 AA meetings in 90 days, and I want you to take your court card down there to the secretary of that meeting every day, and I want that secretary to sign that. And at the end of 90 days, you bring me that court card back, and we'll talk some more. Is that okay? Absolutely. Well, can that kind of thing work? It's not good to interject personal things into a talk like this, I guess. But I know that kind of thing can work. In my non-lawyering time, I devote a good bit of my time to working one-on-one with men who are in that predicament. Next week, I get to give one of them a 2-year cake. Hey, if you ain't been there, let me tell you, that's a big deal. That's a big, big deal. But folks, that ain't got nothing to do with whether a release pending trial should be secured or not. We ought to do that, but we ought to do the other too. Ancient wisdom has taught us if there are two good things, you ought to do one of them, but not leave the other one undone. Don't let the good become the enemy of the best. We call it throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Just because we feel compassionate and obliged to help someone who needs special attention, don't get rid of the system that works. Personally, and I'll close with this, I promise. Years and years and years ago, an old trial lawyer mentor of mine who was trying to teach me how to try cases, we were talking about a thorny issue in a particular case, and he told me, he said, Jerry, you know, what makes life difficult, the decisions that make life difficult, are not deciding between what's good and bad. It's deciding between what's good and good. Think about it. And I look at this situation like that. We've got two good things. We've got getting the defendant to court so we can preserve the right of the victims to closure and we can have accountability maintained in our justice system. But we got another good thing, and that is helping the defendant, being fair to him under the Eighth Amendment, and beyond that, helping him if he needs help. And they're both good things. Well, see, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I don't think they're right about getting rid of secured release any more than I would be right by saying we don't want to help anybody. Get rid of that expense of the county. Don't help those people. Don't have a pretrial release agency. I think we need them both, to be honest with you. I think we need somebody that goes down into the jail who specializes in being able to pick those people out who need help and then try to guide them in the right direction. But they don't have to be responsible for trying to get people to court because, folks, they do a terrible job of it. Now, we got no business going in there trying to figure out who needs to get mental health counseling because of a spousal abuse problem. We don't know how to do that. We don't even want to know how to do that. Let us do what we're really good at doing, and that's getting folks to court so justice can be preserved, not just for that defendant, but for all of us. We went to them a number of times and said, let's work together. Let's do that. You guys do what you are so doggone good at and what we can't do. And let us do what we're so doggone good at and what you obviously can't do. Let's do that. Let's partner up on this deal. Let's have some collaboration. And we were rebuffed at every turn. But we'll keep handing out the olive branch and extending the invitation. I left a lot unsaid, but get you one of those sheets. Oh, and there's a phone number on there, and I'm serious about this. I'm just as serious as I can be about this. Call me. If you got a question or you don't know, call me. If you want to know more, call me. If you want to know what articles maybe I might have written that would pertain to some question you've got, call me. We'll send you materials. We'll be glad to do it. Dr. Morris, we've got about 7 minutes. You got any questions? Oh, come on. There we go. Save the day, man. Go ahead.
Are there bonds that you would not issue for people who are into flight risk, who have a history?
I didn't hear you.
Are there bonds that a bondsman wouldn't write for people who have skipped bond before, for instance? Yeah, of course there are. Yeah, bondsmen turn bonds down, but the bonds that they turn down typically are bonds on a man or a lady that they know is going to run away. Their experience teaches them this person's not showing up, and I don't have the controls to get him there. He doesn't have enough ties with the community. I can't find anybody that can help me get him there. You can ask around, and anybody that you find that knows the guy, they say, oh, Lord, don't get him out. We don't want him back. So that kind of person they won't write a bond for. Now, maybe the judge shouldn't have done it, violated the Eighth Amendment. Maybe there's a bond that should have been set at $15,000 and he wanted to make a political statement, for example, and he set it at $500,000. Well, the bondsman's not going to write that bond. I thought you were going to ask me another question, which is that's a good question. That's a very good question. And we could talk all day and all night about that question. It goes to qualifying the risk. I thought somebody surely was going to say, what about the poor guy in jail that can't afford to pay a bail bond premium? What about him? Should he have to just rot in jail till his trial date? Well, our opposition says that that's the case. They say people just languish in jail. Very low risk flight defendants, zero flight risk. Very low-grade offense that they've been charged with, no serious crime, no prior record, good, strong community ties, got a job, wants out of jail, but can't pay the bond premium. So the poor fellow just have to sit there till trial. I got news for you, folks. There aren't any of those people. There are not any of those people in the Dallas County Jail today. How do I know that? Well, I told you, we're in the insurance business. When the economy turns sour, we have to do what any other business person does. We have to adjust our pricing model to meet the needs of our customer base. Meaning what? Meaning that bail bondsmen today will sell bail on credit. So let's say that this bond on this person who's sitting in jail is $5,000. Well, why would it be no more than $5,000? Well, because they've already told us he's a non-serious offender, he's not a big flight risk. Judge is not going to set a big bail on him. But let's say he sets one that big, it's $5,000. That'd be a lot in that kind of case, certainly. Now, if somebody wants that fellow out of jail, the bail bond premium's $500. They go to a bondsman. The bondsman learns he's got all these good qualities, this fellow does. Probably not going to be a flight risk. And the bondsman says, okay, I'll write the bond. And they say, the people who want him out say, but we don't have $500. And the bondsman says, well, what do you have? Can you come with $150? They say, yeah, we can get $150. Can you pay me $50 every 2 weeks? Yeah, we can do that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that guy's out of jail. Now, are you telling me that there's a man in the Dallas County Jail with no prior record, low-level offender, strong community ties, a job, etc., and nobody will bring $150 to get that man out of jail? It's a red herring, folks. It's a phantom inmate. He's not down there. Okay, y'all got to go to class, don't you? Well, here's another man who's...
Quick one, because you said there's none in Dallas. Have there been studies of it like in other places?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You said that there's none in Dallas County like that.
Yeah.
Is there studies of it like in another place? Like that type of offender?
The only study that I have on that is my experience. And that's not very credible for that kind of study. I'll tell you what, it's a very good question. It's the best question I've heard in any talk I've given on this subject in a long time. And Dr. Morris and I were talking about